Every day, thousands of taxis do something most drivers try to avoid. They spend hours in traffic. They stop hundreds of times. They idle. They accelerate. They brake. Then they do it all over again. If engine durability depended only on how hard a vehicle worked, taxis should be among the first vehicles headed for major repairs. Instead, something completely different happens. Some quietly pass 300,000 miles. Others reach 400,000. And every year, more join a group that sounds almost impossible to many drivers. 500,000 miles on the original engine. That raises a simple question. Why? Not why one lucky taxi reached that milestone. Why does it happen often enough that mechanics, fleet managers, and experienced drivers rarely act surprised anymore? The answer isn't hidden inside one expensive part. It isn't a secret upgrade. It isn't one bottle poured into the engine every few months. The biggest differences are surprisingly ordinary. Most people simply never connect them together. Here's where things become interesting. Take two identical sedans. Same engine. Same model year. Same maintenance schedule printed in the owner's manual. One becomes a taxi. The other becomes a private family car. 10 years later, both have been used completely differently. One may have driven nearly every day for long hours. The other may have spent much of its life parked. One reaches 450,000 miles. The other starts developing expensive problems before reaching half that distance. At first glance, that makes no sense. How does the vehicle working the hardest sometimes end up lasting longer? The first answer surprises many people. It isn't the mileage. It's how the mileage happens. Think about the average private vehicle. Start the engine. Drive 5 minutes. Park. A few hours later. Start it again. Drive to another store. Park again. Repeat that routine for years. Now picture a taxi. The first trip ends. Another passenger gets in. Then another. Then another. Instead of shutting down every few minutes, the engine often stays at normal operating temperature for much longer. That changes more than most drivers realize. Every engine experiences its greatest changes during the first minutes after a cold start. Oil pressure builds. Engine oil begins circulating through every critical passage. Metal parts slowly expand as temperatures rise. Moisture created during previous trips begins leaving the engine. Everything gradually settles into the conditions engineers designed for normal operation. Now imagine interrupting that process over and over again. A short trip. Engine off. Another short trip. Engine off. Another cold start. Another warm-up. Another shutdown. One cycle doesn't matter very much. Thousands of them do. That's one reason many taxis quietly reduce something that private vehicles often experience every single day. Repeated cold starts. Does that mean everyone should leave a vehicle running all day? No. Fuel costs, emissions, local regulations, and unnecessary idling all matter. The real lesson isn't continuous idling. It's understanding that an engine driven long enough to reach full operating temperature usually spends more time working under stable conditions than one used only for repeated short trips. That still doesn't explain 500,000 miles. If warm operating temperatures were the complete answer, every highway commuter would eventually reach extraordinary mileage. Many don't. Clearly, something else separates long-lasting taxis from ordinary vehicles. The next difference doesn't sit under the hood. It hangs on a wall. A calendar. Imagine operating 20 taxis. One vehicle unexpectedly breaks down. Another misses work the next day. A third requires a tow. Those costs add up quickly. Fleet operators learn something many private owners never have to think about. Waiting for something to fail is usually the most expensive plan. Instead, maintenance becomes part of the schedule rather than a reaction to a problem. Engine oil gets changed on time. Coolant gets replaced before it loses effectiveness. Filters don't stay installed for years simply because the vehicle still drives. Belts and hoses receive attention before obvious damage appears. Nothing about those jobs sounds exciting. That's exactly why they're often ignored. Most maintenance doesn't produce dramatic improvements overnight. It quietly reduces the chances of much larger repairs years later. Private ownership often works differently. Everything feels normal. The vehicle starts. Nothing sounds unusual. Another month passes. Then another. Eventually, the oil change becomes overdue. Coolant replacement gets postponed. That tiny vibration can wait until next service. Individually, those delays rarely create immediate disaster. Together, they slowly increase wear over time. Here's another habit that separates many commercial vehicles. Problems rarely stay small for very long. A slight coolant leak today might become overheating months later. A worn belt may eventually affect other components. A dirty air filter doesn't usually stop an engine tomorrow. Over thousands of miles, restricted airflow can slowly affect efficiency. Commercial fleets often fix these issues while they're still inexpensive. Not because every repair is urgent. Because small repairs are usually easier than large ones. That idea sounds obvious. Very few people actually follow it consistently. Now another common belief deserves a closer look. Many people assume city driving automatically destroys engines faster than highway driving. That's only part of the picture. Heavy traffic certainly creates challenges. More braking, more acceleration, more time spent moving slowly. Yet highway driving has its own demands. Long climbs, heavy loads, higher sustained speeds. Neither environment automatically determines how long major engine components remain in good condition. Maintenance habits usually matter far more than choosing one road over another. That brings another surprising question. Why do some taxi companies keep the same vehicles for hundreds of thousands of miles instead of replacing them much sooner? Because replacing an engine or replacing an entire vehicle is expensive. Every additional reliable mile reduces operating costs. That encourages careful maintenance records, regular inspections, and consistent servicing. Most private owners don't think that way. The vehicle simply needs to start tomorrow morning. As long as it does, everything feels fine. Then one day, an unexpected repair arrives. The repair didn't begin that morning. It often began months or even years earlier. The warning signs were simply too small to notice. That leads to another habit almost every high-mileage fleet shares. Attention. Not expensive attention. Consistent attention. Fluid levels get checked. Unusual sounds get investigated. Temperature changes don't get ignored. Small leaks don't become permanent decorations on the driveway. Each individual decision seems insignificant. Years later, those decisions begin explaining why one engine continues operating, while another requires major work. Even after all of this, one final point ties everything together. No single habit explains 500,000 miles. Not longer trips. Not maintenance alone. Not one brand. not one engine design. The vehicles that reach extraordinary mileage usually benefit from several good habits working together over many years. Remove one or two of those habits, and the outcome can look very different. Behind high-mileage taxis, there are dozens of ordinary decisions repeated consistently until they add up to something extraordinary. The next time a taxi with several 100,000 miles drives past, the mileage itself may not be the most interesting part. The more interesting question is what happened during all those miles. Because the difference often isn't one secret product. It's years of ordinary decisions repeated consistently. And those same habits aren't limited to taxis. Many of them can be applied to privately owned cars as well. A vehicle may never become a taxi. It doesn't have to. The real lesson isn't about driving passengers around a city. It's about understanding which everyday habits quietly influence long-term engine durability.